Um, the war in we can say the war from the 80s to 2021 is more connected up to each other in terms of the conflicts, whether it is the terrorism part and how future generations can stop the war effort and more engage in trade and overall try to develop countries rather than weaponry and warfare. I'm gonna mention the whole Taliban and Al-Qaeda and how it developed and how it can be stopped and how the whole war process can be ended in a sense. The thing is, it all started with in the 80s with the whole capitalist versus communist. And it was the Russians in the 80s who kind of, I've at least heard this on the internet, that the so-called Russians were invited to Afghanistan and then they killed the leader or something, and that started the conflict in Afghanistan. And so, just a second here. And so that started a conflict in Afghanistan, and the Afghan fighters were trained by Americans, and that's essentially the Afghan warfare was against the communists who got training from United States, and that actually drained the war efforts from the Soviet Union back then in the 80s, and it kind of collapsed. I think during 1991 or something, or was it 1990? But basically, that's when Russia stopped being communist, and the end of the Cold War happened because of that. And I think a lot of people thought this would be the era of peace and trade and just overall the end of conflicts altogether. But the problem is, because the United States has kind of, in a sense, encouraged the so-called Afghans fighters, the Mujahideen, which was politicized to Islamic warriors, because a Mujahideen, I think, means someone who struggles, um, fights. I don't. Let me think here. I'm gonna look it up. I don't want to give be a little bit wrong here. Yeah. Um, Mujahideen. It's plural form of mujahid. Let's see here. Just a second here. One who wages jihad. That's what the mujahideen means, and it's plural. That's what it means literally. In terms of a political term, it's kind of was more known for Islamic fighter, and that's sort of what I guess the Afghan war kind of did in a sense. And the thing is that developed into Taliban and Al Qaeda, and that's you see of the outcome of the war, it kind of created a new issue, and that was the jihadists, in terms of the Islamists, so to say. And then the whole World Trade Center happened. You know, the bombing. Although this did also happen in 1993. Actually, there was suspected bombing. I think people suspected Afghanistan and Pakistan actually back then, because there was a 1998 and 1997 interview of Osama bin Laden, and they mentioned that only Pakistan and Afghanistan wanted those, was the only one who was open to having them there in a sense, in terms of Osama bin Laden. Other countries, I think, denied them. So that's also the key point to why United States wanted to control Afghanistan. But then, just to go more in the chart of the event, uh, 2001, 11th September, and that's when was it three planes? I think a three third one missed. Maybe I don't know, but there was like two towers that got hit by the planes, and then one plane flew into the Pentagon. and that's when the whole war on terror happened, because this huge sad tragedy that killed many lives, and overall it also destroyed the one important monument of the United States. The World Trade Center was a very important symbol of that, I think, and that's probably also one of the reasons why they targeted the World Trade Center. And then, because this incident, um, the war on terror happened, and that's what and the idea of that was to prevent terrorism, the operation of stopping terrorism, and this has been very criticized by lots of people. Uh, and so the one thing they want to control was obviously Afghanistan, as I mentioned before. Now, why they wanted to attack Iraq, I have no idea about, because maybe because they just kind of kind of didn't like the dictator um, yeah, the dictator of Iraq. So yeah, back then. Let's see, just a second. Yeah, Saddam Hussein was the name. Short memory here. But basically, yeah, he was kind of not liked. I mean, the Americans supported Iraq because, at least back then, because I guess they didn't want the Iranian revolution to happen again, in a sense, the way that the way that it happened in terms of the puppet administration of yeah, there was like a 50s coup, I think, by the CIA and M1 M16 agents. It was on the order of Churchill, though, so Americans are completely the blame here. But basically, they feared communism back then, so that's why they had a Shah to kind of be implanted as friendly to the West. And the Iranian Revolution happened in I think the 70s, and then because they feared this would happen to Iraq, they kind of supported Saddam Hussein. But then, he attacked Kuwait, and yeah, that's kind of wasn't really really something that they liked. So then Saddam Hussein became kind of like an enemy in a sense. Yeah, because I think there was a war debt with the Iraqi and the Iranian war, and so they kind of didn't want to have that the debt on them. But Kuwait didn't want to delete the debt. So instead, Iraq decided to just invade the country. Actually, that's how that conflict happened. If you want the retrospective of that war, um, and yeah, and so since Iraq hasn't really been that favorably to United States or the allies that they considered, at least, so that's maybe they just wanted to take two in one fly, because why not? If you are gonna take war on terror, why not? I think that's why they invaded Iraq. I mean, I think the whole nuclear thing was more of a distraction rather than a legit thing. I think it was more just the enemy picture, and they just felt they can do it. But yeah, but yeah, the whole that was the whole conflict with the whole terrorism thing. I think it was really made because they I don't think they really realized what threat this would make in the future, and that's why this came to haunt them later on. And now that they have left, in a sense, in 2021, even though it was Trump's idea to leave Afghanistan, uh, Biden completed it in a way that wasn't really according to the Trump's plan. I think they withdrew too late, and that's kind of annoyed the Taliban that he had to deal with. Yeah, that's the conclusion of this war. The question is, was it really worth it? And that's kind of a thing that's interesting in terms of history of this war. So yeah, I think that's something that people can learn from it. I think, and overall, the important thing is to realize that I think that trade and overall discussions is more important than warfare. But yeah, the point is though the conflict isn't as easy as some try to make it out to be. I don't think Americans wanted to have terrorism happen, but it just became the outcome of the Cold War that was back then, and that's why it became the thing. And now the question is um, whether the world is gonna continue this or whether they are just gonna just work together. And that's the interesting thing. It's in terms of history and such, and what it goes to the future in terms of conflicts or cooperation, and that's what I find interesting. Thank you for listening, and bye.